welcome to session 4 of Unit 5. And in this session, we'll be looking at the inquiry methods of teaching physics. My name is Patrick Ejay. By the end of this session, you should be able to explain the purpose of using inquiry methods of teaching, then state the learning mode of inquiry methods of teaching physics, and finally, identify the two main elements of inquiry teaching. So let's look at the nature of inquiry methods of teaching. And basically, the essence of inquiry teaching comprises two main elements. And as a teacher, you must take note of these two main elements anytime you want to employ this teaching method in your classroom. The first element is the arrangement of the learning environment to facilitate student-centered instruction. So as a teacher, you must understand that it is more important when your instruction is said that it is centered on your students. When your students are the focus of the teaching that you do in the class, so that learning on their part can happen. And so anytime you are arranging the learning environment, ensure that you have an environment. You create an environment that will facilitate student-centered form of instruction where you, the teacher, you serve as a facilitator to the student. And two, or the second element is you, the teacher, providing sufficient guidance to ensure direction and success in discovering scientific concepts and principles. So as much as possible, as a facilitator, you are not to be telling them, you are to give guidance, you are to give direction, let them know what they are to be doing at every stage or at every point in time. And you can do this through questioning. So one thing that every teacher must know anytime you want to use the inquiry method is that you are to help your learners obtain a sense of direction. And one way you can help them to obtain a sense of direction in their learning is you, the teacher, using questions. So when you are using questions, you realize that you can pose questions so that these questions are to give the learners a sense of direction. And so the art of being a good conversationalist requires listening and posing insightful questions. And so when we say you are a good conversationalist, what we mean is that you are somebody who can initiate conversation and you can sustain the conversation for a certain period of time. And as a teacher who may want to use inquiry, a teacher who is inquiry-oriented, you must be a good conversationalist so that once you initiate a conversation, which will serve as a guide to your learners, which will give your learners a sense of direction, you should be able to sustain that conversation. So to be a good conversationalist, you must listen well and ask appropriate questions. You must ask probing questions, questions that can assist your learners in organizing their thoughts and also gain insight. So inquiry-oriented teachers seldom tell, but they often ask questions. Instead of telling your learners, it's better you ask them a question so that they can come out with a solution to the problem. So anytime you ask a question, the question serves as a hint or a clue to your learners. It guides them as to how they can provide a solution to the question. So let's look at this example. Let's assume that your students are studying a pendulum, but they have not discovered that the frequency of the pendulum is related to its length. So as a teacher, are you just going to tell them that, oh, frequency is related to the length of the string that is being used? No. What you will do is that it is good you now ask series of questions that will guide your learners in order to come out with the relationship, for them to discover that there is a relationship between the frequency of oscillation as well as the length of the pendulum. So what you must do here is asking questions, series of questions, probing questions, questions that will cause your learners to think. Now, what is the purpose and learning mode of inquiry method of teaching? And the purpose of the inquiry method is to give students experience in the actual use of equipment and materials as they develop knowledge, skills, and values related to science inquiry and technology. So, through inquiry, your learners should be able to know how to use a certain equipment or apparatus. And for that reason, the predominantly learning mode is kinesthetic, which basically talks about using the hand to manipulate materials and equipment. And in inquiry, the group can be an individual to a small group. So you can have an individual, you can start with an individual person, or you can put your learners in smaller groups for the inquiry activity. What are some of the introductory guides in using inquiry, or some of the guides that you can take anytime you want to use inquiry? And you must first of all understand that inquiry is an important aspect of science teaching. Let your learners come out with their own meaning of a problem. Ensure that you have a classroom environment that is learner-centered, that is focused on the learners and not on the teacher. And some methods that are related to the use of inquiry design include asking questions, using technology, designing experiments, analyzing data, formulating explanations, thinking about the relationship between evidence and explanation, and communicating explanations and methods. So anytime you want to use inquiry, these are the methods you can follow. That there must be questioning, and the questions are to serve as a guide. You can use technology, PowerPoint presentations, or to provide guidance to your learners. You can design experiments. Let your learners analyze data. They should communicate their explanations as well as the methods that they use in arriving at a solution to a particular problem. So also in using inquiry methods of teaching, select the inquiry activity that best illustrates the concepts or skills you have stated as your objectives. Now note that in every lesson, the teacher, you have a set of objectives that you want to achieve at the end of the lesson. And so every activity that you select should help you to achieve those objectives. And also make necessary changes in the physical arrangement of the room. You realize in our classroom, normal classroom situations, we have the various rows in the classroom. If you realize this will not facilitate your inquiry method of teaching, but rather letting your students in their small groups bring their desks or chairs closer to one another in a small circular form. If you think that is what will help your learners come out with a solution to a problem, just make that arrangement to help you achieve the objective stated for the lesson. And be sure materials are available and functional. So if there are some materials, we said that the learning mode is the kinesthetic. Learners must manipulate. They must manipulate equipment and as well as materials. So make sure every equipment you provide to your learners, they are functional. And check any equipment to be sure it works. So you must do this as a teacher. And give clear, specific, or concise directions, including safety precautions, where to obtain materials, assignment of groups, and your expectations of conduct and reporting. All these must be given so that the purpose for which you are using the inquiry method of teaching can be achieved. Now, students, in this session, we look at the inquiry method of teaching and the purpose for using this teaching method. Now, as we bring this session to an end, let us have this as a take-home. What are the two main elements of inquiry teaching? Then 2, give one way in which a teacher can help a student to obtain a sense of direction. I hope you enjoyed this session on inquiry method of teaching.